My 5-year-old niece dumped a bucket of ice water on me in the middle of a family dinner and said, "Grandma says you're just a prop and we don't have to respect props because you're a brokey." My mother didn't even look up from her phone to see if I was okay, she just adjusted the ring light on the table and asked if I could do it again because she missed the authentic reaction for her reel. My mother, Diana, is a famous lifestyle influencer with 10 million followers who built her massive empire by sharing every single, vulnerable moment of my life without my permission. She made millions off my first heartbreak, my college rejection, and even my medical school struggles. She thinks she owns my story, but she's about to find out what happens when the main character decides to rewrite the ending. Before we get into how I turned her glamorous, legacy gala into a crime scene, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button, because this is the ultimate lesson in why you should never treat your children like content. I stood there in my living room, soaked to the bone, watching the water drip onto the expensive rug Diana had gifted me, mostly so she could film the unboxing video and write it off as a business expense. My niece, Lily, was already being coached by Diana's assistant on how to point and laugh more naturally for the camera. To the world, Diana was the ultimate, empowered mama, a woman who had overcome a tragic past to raise a successful surgeon daughter. But to me, she was a predator who looked at my tears and saw dollar signs. I'm a cardiothoracic surgeon. I spend 15 hours a day in an operating room holding people's lives in my hands, but in my mother's house, I was just a background character in her carefully curated aesthetic. "Don't be so dramatic, Chloe," Diana said, finally looking up from her screen. She looked perfect, of course. Not a hair out of place, her skin glowing with the kind of radiance that costs $20,000 a month to maintain. "It's just water. It's funny. The audience loves it when you're relatable. You've been so stiff lately, so doctorish. We need to remind people that you're still my little girl who needs her mama." "I'm 32 years old, Mom," I said, my voice shaking. "I just finished a 12-hour shift. I came here for dinner, not to be a prop for your TikTok." "And who paid for that medical school tuition?" she shot back, her voice losing its sweet, influencer tone and turning into the sharp, cold blade I knew so well. "I did. With the money I made from the Single Mom Survival series. Every time you cried about a chemistry test, I bought you a tutor with the ad revenue. You wouldn't be a surgeon without my platform, so the least you can do is stand there and look wet for 30 seconds. I walked out that night without saying another word. I drove back to my small, quiet apartment and sat in the dark. I thought about the thousands of times she had exploited me. When I was 10, she told the world I had a mystery illness and filmed me looking pale and weak in bed. I remembered the taste of the bitter, herbal supplements she made me take that made me feel dizzy and nauseous. I remembered the GoFundMe she started, the hundreds of thousands of dollars that poured in from sympathetic strangers. I never saw a dime of that money, and curiously, I got better the moment the donations started to slow down. The breaking point happened 2 weeks later. I was being honored at the Metropolitan Medical Excellence Awards. It was the biggest night of my career. I was receiving the Innovator of the Year award for a new heart valve procedure I'd developed. I had worked myself to the bone for this. I invited Diana, hoping that for once, she could just be a mother. I begged her not to film. I begged her to just sit in the audience and be proud. "Of course, honey," she had said, wiping a fake tear from her eye. "This is your night. I'm just here as a fan." The ballroom was magnificent. 500 of the top medical professionals in the country were there, along with investors and press. When they called my name, the applause was thunderous. I walked up to the stage, my heart hammering against my ribs. I felt like I had finally made it. I was no longer Diana's daughter. I was Dr. Chloe Vance. As I reached the podium, the large screen behind me flickered. I thought it was going to show my surgical diagrams or a professional headshot. Instead, a video started playing. It wasn't professional. It was grainy, hidden camera footage. It was me. 3 months ago. I was in the hospital locker room, slumped against a bench, sobbing uncontrollably. It was the night I lost my first patient on the table, a 6-year-old boy. I was broken. I was vulnerable. I was in a place where no one was supposed to see me. Then, Diana's voice came over the speakers in a recorded voiceover, soft and inspirational. Even the strongest heroes have their breaking points, her voice echoed through the silent, horrified ballroom. As a mother, watching my daughter struggle with the weight of her failures is the hardest thing I've ever done. But I told her, Chloe, use that pain. Turn those tears into content. This is what real strength looks like, guys. Don't forget to check the link in my bio for the full Grief to Growth series, sponsored by Better Healing. The video ended with a close-up of my puffy, tear-streaked face. The lights in the ballroom came up. 500 of my peers were staring at me, not with respect, but with a mixture of pity and confusion. My boss, the chief of surgery, looked away. The investors were whispering. In 1 minute, my mother had turned my professional sanctuary into a sideshow. She had taken my most private, agonizing failure and packaged it for engagement. I looked into the front row. Diana was holding her phone up, filming the audience's reaction. She had a look of pure, satisfied triumph on her face. She didn't see my humiliation, she only saw the viral moment she had just created. She blew me a kiss and mouthed the words, "You're trending." I didn't give my speech. I didn't take the trophy. I walked off that stage, through the side doors, and kept walking until I reached the parking lot. The cold night air hit my face, but I didn't feel it. I felt a strange, icy calm. The good daughter had died in that ballroom. I spent the next 48 hours in a trance. I didn't answer Diana's 50 calls. I didn't look at the thousands of tags on Instagram. I went to the one person I knew Diana feared, my great-aunt Martha. Martha had been cut off from the family 20 years ago, right after my father died. Diana told me Martha was unstable and greedy, but I suspected the truth was much darker. I found Martha in a tiny, weathered cottage 3 hours outside the city. She didn't look unstable. She looked like a woman who had seen the devil and survived. When I told her what Diana had been doing, she wasn't surprised. She went to an old oak chest in the corner of her room and pulled out a dusty leather ledger and a stack of yellowing medical files. "I've been waiting for you to come to your senses, Chloe," Martha said, her voice like gravel. "Your mother didn't start being a monster on Instagram. She's been one since the day she realized that tragedy is more profitable than truth." I opened the files. My hands started to shake. The first thing I saw was my own name. The mystery illness from when I was 10. I saw the doctor's notes, not from the fancy specialists Diana told everyone about, but from a series of clinics in different states. The notes all said the same thing: patient shows symptoms of mild toxicity. Mother insists on continued dosage of over-the-counter sedatives and herbal extracts. Recommended CPS intervention. Diana hadn't just watched me be sick. She had made me sick. She had been drugging me with high doses of sleep aids and natural toxins to make me look lethargic and pale for the cameras and the GoFundMe updates. But as I kept reading, I found something even worse. I found the insurance investigator's report from the year my father died. Diana had told the world he died in a tragic car accident caused by a faulty brake line. She used that tragedy to launch her first blog, The Widowed Wanderer. The report said the brake lines weren't faulty. They had been intentionally cut. And the only person who had access to the car in the garage that morning was Diana. The investigator couldn't prove it then, and Diana had used a high-priced lawyer, paid for by the life insurance policy, to shut the case down. I sat there in that small cottage, the evidence of my mother's crime spread out before me. She wasn't just an influencer. She was a fraud, a child abuser, and quite possibly, a murderer. She had built a kingdom of gold on a foundation of blood and lies, and she was currently planning a legacy gala to celebrate 20 years of her brand. "She thinks she's untouchable," Martha said, watching me. "She thinks she owns the narrative because she has the loudest voice. She doesn't, I said, closing the ledger. The icy calm from the ballroom had returned, but now it was focused. She's spent 20 years putting me in front of the camera. It's time I finally give her the close-up she deserves. I knew exactly what I had to do. Diana's gala was in 3 days. It was going to be live-streamed to millions. It was the night she was going to announce her $10 million book deal. I was supposed to give the keynote, tribute speech. I called her back that evening. "Chloe. Darling," she chirped, sounding as if nothing had happened at the awards ceremony. "The engagement on that video is insane. Even the New York Times is calling. We need to coordinate your dress for the gala. Something white, something pure. We're going for the healing family vibe." "I'll be there, Mom," I said, my voice as smooth as a surgical blade. "And don't worry about the speech. I've already written it. It's going to be the most honest thing the world has ever heard." "That's my girl," she said. "I knew you'd see the vision. See you on the red carpet." I hung up and looked at the ledger. I had 3 days to coordinate with the FBI, the insurance board, and a few friends from Diana's past who were tired of being silent. My mother wanted a legacy. I was going to give her one that would last a lifetime, in a federal prison. The next morning, I arrived at the hospital for my shift, but I wasn't there to operate. I walked straight into the office of the chief of surgery, Dr. Eris Thorne. He was sitting behind his massive desk, looking at the viral video of my locker room breakdown on his tablet. He looked up at me with an expression that was half pity and half professional concern. For a man who valued the reputation of his hospital above all else, seeing one of his lead surgeons sobbing like a broken child on the front page of every social media site was a nightmare. "Chloe," he said, sighing as he set the tablet down. "I've been getting calls from the board all morning. We've had to postpone your surgeries for the week. The donors are asking questions about your emotional stability. They're worried you're a liability." "I'm not the liability, Dr. Thorne," I said, placing a manila envelope on his desk. "My mother is. And I'm here to tell you that I'm taking care of it. But I need your help. I need the hospital's legal department to authorize the release of the unedited security footage from that night in the locker room. I also need the logs from the pediatric ward from 22 years ago." He frowned, leaning forward. "That's a big ask. That's deep in the archives. Why would you need records from when you were a child?" "Because my mother told the world I was a miracle survivor of a mystery illness," I said, my voice steady. "But I have reason to believe she was the one who made me sick. I need the official toxicology reports from my admission in 2003. I think they were suppressed, and I think I know who paid to keep them quiet." While the hospital's legal team started digging into the past, I moved on to my next target. I met with a man named Silas Vance. Silas was my father's younger brother, a man Diana had labeled a worthless alcoholic, to keep me away from him. I found him working as a mechanic in a grease-stained shop on the outskirts of the city. He didn't look like an alcoholic. He looked like a man who had been beaten down by a very powerful enemy. "She told me you didn't want to see me," Silas said, wiping his hands on a rag as we sat in his cramped office. "She said you blamed me for your father's death. That you hated the sight of me. She told me you were the one who cut the brake lines, Silas," I whispered. Silas let out a hollow laugh. "I loved my brother more than anything. I was the one who told the police to look at her. I was the one who found the toolbox in her gardening shed with the metal snips still wet with brake fluid. But Diana, she was already famous mama on the local news by then. She had the public on her side. She told the investigators I was a bitter, jealous drunk who was trying to steal her insurance money. They believed her. They always believed the woman with the perfect smile." Silas handed me a small, rusted metal box. "I kept this. It's the snips I found. I never threw them away. I knew one day you'd grow up and realize who she really was." I took the box, feeling the weight of the evidence. I spent the rest of the day in a high-rise office building downtown, meeting with a lead investigator from the State Insurance Fraud Bureau and an agent from the FBI's White-Collar Crime Division. I laid everything out: the GoFundMe fraud, the medical abuse, the suspected murder, and the massive tax evasion I'd uncovered in her Diana Vance media filings. She's been using her lifestyle brand to launder the money she stole from the sick child funds 20 years ago, the FBI agent said, scrolling through the digital ledgers I'd taken from Diana's cloud storage. She's built a house of cards, Dr. Vance. But we need a public confession or a direct link to the arson and the break lines to make the murder charge stick. You'll get your confession, I promised. She can't help herself when there's a camera involved. She loves her own voice too much to keep it shut. The next day, Diana called me while I was sitting in my car outside her massive estate. I watched through the gates as a fleet of trucks arrived, unloading crates of white roses and crystal centerpieces for the gala. She was in full director mode, screaming at a florist about the exact shade of pure white for the stage backdrop. "Chloe! Where are you?" she snapped when I picked up. "The jeweler is here with the diamond necklace you're wearing for the opening. It's a loaner from Cartier, so don't get your Dr. Germs on it. And I've decided we're going to open the gala with a live reenactment of your recovery from the mystery illness. We've hired a child actress to play young you. It's going to be so emotional. The tissues are already being placed on the tables." "I have something better, Mom," I said, looking at the rusted metal snips in the box on my passenger seat. "I found some old home movies. From the day Dad died. I thought we could play them during my speech. To show where the legacy really started." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could almost hear Diana's brain working, calculating the risk. "Home movies? I thought those were lost in the move." "I found them at Aunt Martha's," I said. "They're beautiful. They show you in the garage, working on the car. You look so focused, Mom. So dedicated to the family." I don't know if that's the right vibe, Chloe," she said, her voice dropping an octave. The sweet mama mask was slipping. "We want to focus on the future. On the brand. The audience loves a tragedy, Mom," I said, mimicking her own tone. "You taught me that. It's about authenticity, right? Let's show them the real Diana Vance." "Fine," she hissed. "But I want to see the footage before it goes on the big screen. Send it to my assistant." "I'll bring it to the rehearsal tomorrow," I said. I want it to be a surprise for the staff. I hung up and felt a surge of adrenaline. I wasn't sending the footage to her assistant. I was sending it to the tech crew at the gala, a crew that I had secretly replaced with a team of private investigators and digital specialists. That night, Diana posted a new reel. It showed her standing in front of her mansion, looking at the sunset. "Life is a journey of healing," the caption read. "In 2 days, I will share my greatest legacy with the world. A story of triumph over darkness. Thank you for being part of my family. Hashtag the Vance legacy, hashtag gala prep, hashtag mother-daughter bond." I watched the video and saw the comments pouring in. "You're such an inspiration. Chloe is so lucky to have you. I wish my mom was like Diana." They had no idea. They were all sitting in the dark, waiting for a show. And I was about to give them the performance of a lifetime. I looked at the medical records one last time, the records that showed my mother had slowly poisoned me for 3 years to buy her first house. I thought about the little boy I'd lost on the operating table, and how she had used my grief to sell a growth series. The good daughter was long gone. I spent the night before the gala in a hotel room with Aunt Martha and Silas. We were a broken family, brought back together by a shared monster. We watched the clock tick toward the morning. "She's going to try to kill you, you know," Martha said, her eyes fixed on the news report about the upcoming gala. "When she realizes you've trapped her. She won't go quietly." "Let her try," I said, checking the small microphone pinned to the inside of my dress. "I've spent my whole life being her prop. I know exactly how she moves. The morning of the gala arrived with a gray, heavy sky. The city was buzzing. Every major influencer and lifestyle reporter was heading toward the Vance estate. Diana was in her element, presiding over a kingdom of white silk and lies. She didn't know that the child actress she'd hired had been sent home, and that the person waiting in the wings was a surprise she hadn't planned for. I put on the white dress she'd chosen for me. It was tight, restrictive, and made me look exactly like the pure daughter she wanted the world to see. I looked in the mirror and didn't see a doctor. I saw a soldier. I picked up my phone and sent a final text to the FBI lead agent. We're a go. The cameras start rolling in 1 hour. I walked out of the hotel and into the waiting car. It was time to attend the party of the century. And for Diana Vance, it was time to finally face the music. The Vance estate looked like a vision of heaven, but it felt like a funeral. Thousands of white roses draped over every marble pillar, their scent so thick it was nauseating. A massive white stage had been built over the infinity pool, and the Legacy Gala was being beamed live to over 5 million people across the globe. Diana was in her glory, wearing a dress made of literal silver thread, floating through the crowd like a queen. She was hugging sponsors, taking selfies with famous influencers, and basking in the glow of her $10 million book deal. She didn't notice me standing in the shadows of the wings, watching her through the lens of a forensic accountant and a daughter who had finally woken up. I checked my earpiece one last time. The FBI team was positioned at every exit, dressed as high-end security. Silas and Martha were in the front row, hidden behind oversized sunglasses, waiting for the signal. Before we see the moment Diana's world turns into a digital execution, remember that the most dangerous person is the one who has been watching you in silence for 30 years. 5 minutes, Dr. Vance, the stage manager whispered into my ear. Your mother wants a big emotional entrance. Wait for the spotlight to hit the center stairs. I looked at Diana on the giant screen. She was already on stage, holding a vintage microphone, her eyes glistening with practiced tears. Tonight isn't about me, she told the hushed crowd and the millions watching online. It's about the legacy of a mother's love. It's about my daughter, Chloe, who overcame a terminal illness as a child and grew up to save lives. It's about the strength we find in our darkest hours. The music swelled, a soft, cinematic piano track that Diana had personally selected to manipulate the audience. But before Chloe comes out, I want to show you the moment I knew she was a fighter. I want to show you the mystery illness years. This is the first time anyone has seen this footage. The lights dimmed. Diana stepped back, her face illuminated by the glow of the giant screen. She expected to see the grainy footage of 10-year-old me looking pale in a hospital bed. She expected to see the miracle she had sold for 2 decades. Instead, the screen went black for 3 seconds. Then, a document appeared. It wasn't a home movie. It was a high-resolution scan of a toxicology report from 2003. A murmur rippled through the audience. Diana froze. Her influencer smile faltered for a fraction of a second, but she was a pro. She stayed in character. Oh, it looks like we have a little technical glitch with the files, she laughed nervously into the mic. Just a second, guys. The screen didn't glitch. It scrolled. The report highlighted a specific line in bright red, patient Chloe Vance. Findings, high levels of diphenhydramine and digitoxin. Conclusion, symptoms consistent with chronic, low-grade poisoning. Underneath it, a new window popped up. It was a recorded video from a hidden camera. It wasn't from 20 years ago. It was from 2 days ago. It was Diana in her dressing room, talking to her assistant about the gala. We need the child actress to look even paler, Diana's voice boomed through the speakers, crisp and clear. Make her eyes look sunken. We need that dying look to really sell the book deal. That's how we got the first 6-figure donation back in the day, remember? I used to put a little something in Chloe's tea to make her look like she was on death's door. It's called marketing, honey. Get with the program. The silence that hit the ballroom was physical. It was a vacuum of sound. Diana turned to the tech booth, her face contorting into a mask of pure rage. Turn it off. Cut the feed. What is this? But the tech crew didn't answer. I stepped out onto the stage, the white silk of my dress catching the light. I wasn't the pure daughter anymore. I was the evidence. I walked straight to the podium and took the microphone from her shaking hand. Good evening, I said, my voice projected to the 5 million people watching at home. My mother is right about one thing. Tonight is about a legacy. But it's not the one she's been selling you. I pointed to the screen. The image changed again. This time, it was the insurance report from the day my father died. Beside it was a side-by-side comparison of the metal snips Silas had given me and the cut brake lines from the car. A professional forensic engineer appeared in a pre-recorded clip, explaining that the marks matched perfectly. My father didn't die in an accident, I told the crowd. He died because he found out about the GoFundMe fraud Diana was running using my health. And when he threatened to go to the police, she didn't just lose a husband, she gained a tragic backstory that she used to build this mansion. Diana lunged for the microphone, her eyes wild. She's lying. She's mentally unstable. She's jealous of my success. Look at her, she's obsessed. I didn't flinch. I just looked at the camera. Mom, you always told me that authenticity is the most important part of a brand. So let's be authentic. Why don't we tell them about the $300,000 you siphoned off the Chloe's Heart Fund last year? The one you told everyone was for a pediatric wing, but actually paid for your new boat? A bank of numbers appeared on the screen, direct transfers from the charity account to Diana's private offshore holdings. The lifestyle queen was being dismantled in real time, one line item at a time. The sponsors in the front row, the CEOs of major beauty brands and tech companies, didn't wait for the end. They stood up and walked out, their faces full of disgust. The media was in a frenzy, their cameras flashing like a lightning storm. Diana looked at the giant screen, then at the audience, then back at me. The realization finally hit her. The world wasn't watching a triumph. They were watching a public execution. Her phone, sitting on the podium, started vibrating uncontrollably. Notifications were screaming, sponsorship terminated. Book deal cancelled. Account suspended. You've ruined me, she hissed, leaning close so only I could hear. Her voice was a venomous whisper. I made you. I can destroy you, Chloe. I still have the keys to your life. No, Mom, I said, pulling a small silver key from my pocket and holding it up. These are the keys to the gardening shed. The one where you kept the metal snips. The FBI already has the original ones. And they're waiting for you at the bottom of the stairs. Diana looked toward the exits. The security guards had moved in, forming a perimeter around the stage. Agent Miller from the FBI stepped into the spotlight, holding a pair of handcuffs. Diana Vance, he said, his voice echoing through the estate. You are under arrest for insurance fraud, child endangerment, and the suspected murder of Arthur Vance. You have the right to remain silent. Diana didn't remain silent. She started to scream. It wasn't an inspirational scream. It was the sound of a cornered animal. She tried to run toward the back of the stage, but she tripped on the silver thread of her own expensive dress, falling hard onto the marble. As she was being lifted up and cuffed, a drone from a rival news agency hovered just feet from her face, capturing every streak of mascara and every ugly, desperate sob. The live stream was still going. The comments were a blur of, "Justice for Chloe," and, "Cancel Diana." The woman who had spent 20 years manipulating the camera was finally being seen for who she truly was, not a queen, but a ghost in a silver dress. I stood at the edge of the stage and watched them lead her away. Aunt Martha and Silas stood up and walked toward me. For the first time in 20 years, the three of us stood together without a lie between us. The gala was over. The lights were still bright, but the party was dead. I looked down at the white roses, millions of dollars worth of flowers that were now just trash on the floor. I took off the Cartier necklace and handed it to a police officer. "The show is over," I said softly. But the real work was just beginning. I had an empire to liquidate, a father's name to clear, and a future to build that didn't involve a single camera. The courthouse in downtown Manhattan felt like a tomb made of marble and glass. For 6 months, the world had been obsessed with the fall of Diana Vance. The lifestyle queen had become the prisoner of truth. Sitting at the witness stand, I looked down at my hands. They were the hands of a surgeon, steady, clean, and strong. Across from me, behind the defense table, Diana looked like a shadow of the woman who had presided over the Legacy Gala. She had traded her silver silk for a plain navy suit, and her skin, once glowing with expensive treatments, now looked gray and papery under the harsh fluorescent lights. She tried to catch my eye, her lips trembling in that practiced way she used to get what she wanted, but I didn't look away. I didn't blink. I wasn't her prop anymore. I was the one telling the story now. The trial lasted 3 weeks, and it was a catalogue of horrors. The prosecution didn't just use the evidence I had found, they dug up things I hadn't even imagined. They found a secret storage unit Diana had been paying for in cash for 15 years. Inside, they found the journals of my father, Arthur Vance. He had documented the first time he realized I was being drugged. He had written about the herbal teas Diana was forcing on me and how he had caught her hiding a bottle of industrial-strength sedatives in the flour jar. The last entry in his journal was dated the night before he died. It said, "I'm taking Chloe and leaving tomorrow. I'm going to the police. Diana is not the woman I married. She is a monster who would kill her own child for a headline." Hearing those words read aloud in court was like being hit by a freight train. I saw Silas in the front row, his face buried in his hands, his shoulders shaking as he wept for the brother he couldn't save. I saw Aunt Martha gripping her cane so hard her knuckles were white. The defense tried to argue that the journal was a forgery, that my father was the unstable one, and that Diana was a victim of a vengeful, obsessed daughter. But then the medical experts took the stand. They showed the jury the suppressed toxicology reports from the pediatric ward. They explained how the low-grade poisoning had stunted my growth and nearly caused permanent kidney failure. They showed the sick child fund records, where millions of dollars meant for charity had been used to buy Diana's first 3 properties. The most damning moment came on the final day. The prosecution played the full, unedited video from the gala, the one where Diana whispered to me that she made me and could destroy me. The audio was crystal clear. The jury saw the mask slip. They saw the empowered mama vanish and the cold-blooded predator take her place. When the jury returned after only 4 hours of deliberation, the room was so quiet you could hear the clock ticking on the wall. Guilty. On every single count. Child endangerment, massive securities fraud, tax evasion, and most importantly, the murder of Arthur Vance in the 2nd degree. The judge didn't show an ounce of mercy. He looked at Diana and said that in 30 years on the bench, he had never seen a more calculated betrayal of the sacred bond between a mother and child. He sentenced her to 30 years in a federal facility. As the marshals moved in to lead her away, Diana finally lost her cool. The influence was gone. She started screaming at me, her voice shrill and ugly, echoing off the high ceilings. She called me an ungrateful brat. She said I would be nothing without her. She said she gave me a life and I had stolen hers. I watched her go, and for the first time in my life, I felt absolutely nothing. No anger, no pity, just a profound sense of relief, like a weight I'd been carrying for 3 decades had finally been lifted. The liquidation of the Vance estate took another year. I didn't want the mansion, the cars, or the silver thread dresses. I sold everything. Every cent of that money, over $20 million, went into the Arthur Vance Foundation. We built a pediatric wing at the hospital that focuses specifically on treating children who are victims of medical abuse and Munchausen by proxy. I went back to the operating room, but it was different now. The hospital board had apologized to me publicly, and my colleagues treated me not with pity, but with a deep, quiet respect. I was no longer a liability. I was a survivor who had fought for her own life and won. A few months ago, Silas, Martha, and I went to the cemetery where my father was buried. For 20 years, his grave had been a place of shame because of the lies Diana had told. But that day, we brought a new headstone. It didn't mention his tragic accident. It said, Arthur Vance. A father who gave everything to save his daughter. Finally at rest. We sat there in the grass for a long time, just talking about the man he was, the man who loved the smell of old books and the sound of the ocean. Silas told me stories about their childhood that I had never heard. For the first time, I felt like I had a family that wasn't a brand. I still get a letter from the prison every month. Diana hasn't stopped trying to rebrand herself behind bars. She writes about how she's writing a new book called Betrayed by Blood, and how she's the victim of a massive conspiracy. She asks me to send her money for the commissary so she can buy decent skincare. I don't open the letters anymore. I have a shredder in my office, and every time one of those envelopes arrives with her inmate number on it, I drop it in. The sound of the paper being destroyed is the only content I need from her. I'm getting married in a few weeks to a man who doesn't even have an Instagram account. He's a high school teacher who loves quiet mornings and long hikes. We're having the wedding in Aunt Martha's backyard. There won't be any drones, no sponsorships, and definitely no viral moments. There will just be a few friends, some good food, and the people who actually know who I am. I've realized that the most beautiful parts of life are the ones that are never captured on a screen. The moments that belong only to the people who are actually there to live them. Rowan Vance and Diana Vance, they were two sides of the same coin. They thought that because they had the loudest voices and the most followers, they could rewrite the truth. They thought that people like us, the boring wives and the prop daughters, were just there to be used and discarded. But they forgot that empires built on lies are made of glass. All it takes is one person brave enough to throw the first stone. I'm Dr. Chloe Vance, and for the first time in my 32 years, I am the only one who gets to say who I am. I hope my story reminds you that your life is not for sale. It doesn't matter how much power someone thinks they have over you, they can never own your spirit unless you let them. If you're living in someone else's shadow, it's time to step into the light. The truth might be messy, and it might break your world apart for a while, but on the other side of that breaking is a freedom you can't even imagine. Thank you for walking this path with me. I'm going to go live my life now, and for once, the cameras are staying off.